Now, let's dig some facts about food. Now, about food-related deaths in the Philippines, these are the facts. Now, the major causes linked to diet and food or intake are of four types. So these are the causes. The first one, heart disease and stroke. Now, the leading cause of death driven by unhealthy diets, which are high in processed foods, fat, sugar, leading to high blood pressure, cholesterol, obesity, and blockages. Now, of course, the second one, we are very much familiar, diabetes mellitus, which is a top killer, strongly associated with poor diets and lack of exercise. Now, the third one, cancer. Now, the rates of cancer are rising, which are linked to unhealthy eating and lifestyle factors. And the last one, linked to diet or food intake, is about malnutrition and starvation. Now, despite our country is categorized as an agricultural, the food security causes deaths from severe undernutrition and related illnesses with documented cases of starvation deaths. Now, about food safety and contamination. Now, pinag-usapan ko rito is about food-related deaths in the Philippines. Now, we go now to the food safety and contamination. And I have listed the factual information. There are three facts. Number one, the foodborne illnesses. Now, unsafe food, which contains bacteria, viruses, and chemicals, these causes diarrhea and other diseases leading to thousands of deaths and long-term disabilities annually. Now, the second one is the poor food handling. Now, it involves contamination of farms, markets, homes, of food service due to lack of clean water, proper sanitation, and refrigeration. And the last one is what we call the hot meat and contaminated seafoods. Now, this involves, of course, the unregistered businesses which sell low-quality meat and issues with handling that contribute to some illnesses. Now, what are the statistics and trends in the Philippines regarding the food-related deaths? Now, the NCD or the non-communicable diseases account for the vast majority, which is approximately around 80% of deaths in the Philippines. Now, the second statistic is the high-risk factors, which is approximately around 90% of the Filipinos have at least one risk factor for NCD or non-communicable disease, which includes poor diet, smoking, and lack of exercise. Now, to conclude these three facts about the food-related deaths in the Philippines, the deaths related to food in the Philippines are a dual crisis of eating much of the wrong things and not having access to enough safe and nutritious food. Now, since we are talking about here food, the question is what the Bible says about food. And definitely we are focusing to Leviticus chapter 11 and and Deuteronomy chapter 14. But I'm going to use the whole chapter of Leviticus chapter 11 concerning the clean and unclean foods as prescribed by our God. Now we go down to, we can read the whole chapter of Leviticus chapter 11. Starting in verse 1, it says, Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals which you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Among the animals, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hooves, and chewing the cud, that you may eat. Nevertheless, this you shall not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have cloven hooves. The camel, because it chews the cud, but does not have cloven hoofs, is unclean to you. The hyrax, because it chews the cud, but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud, but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. And the swine, though it divides the hoof, having cloven hooves, yet does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. This you may eat of all that are in the water, whatever in the water that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. In verse 10, but all in the seas or in the rivers that do not have fins and scales, all that move in the water, or any living thing which in the water, they are an abomination to you. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Whatever in the water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. And these you shall regard as an abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten, they are abomination, the eagle, the vulture, and the buzzard, the kite and the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, the ostrich, the short-eared owl, the seagull, and the hawk after its kind, the little owl, the fisher owl, and the scratch owl, the white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron, after its kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. All flying insects that creep on all fours shall be an abomination to you. Yet this you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to live on earth. This you may eat, the locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind, the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. By this you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. The carcass of any animal which divides the foot but is not cloven hoof or does not chew the cud is unclean to you. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean, and whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of animals that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Whoever touches any such carcass shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries any such carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It is unclean to you. This also shall be unclean to you among the creeping things that creep on the earth, the mole, the mouse, and the large lizard after its kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand reptile, the sun lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean. Whether it is any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever item it is, in which any work is done, it must be put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls you shall break, and whatever is in it shall be unclean. In such a vessel, any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean, and any drink that may be drunk from it becomes unclean. And everything on which a part of such carcass falls shall be unclean, whether it is in the oven or cooking stove, it shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern in which there is a plenty of water shall be clean, but whatever touches any such carcass becomes unclean. And if a part of such carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it remains clean. But if water is put on the seed, and if a part of any such carcass falls on it, it becomes unclean to you. And if any animal which you may eat dies, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. He who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. And he also who carries its carcass shall wash its clothes and be unclean until evening. And every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatever crawls on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet among all creeping things that creep on the earth, this you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourselves abominable with many creeping thing that creeps, nor shall you make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore consecrate yourselves, and you shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any creeping thing that creeps on the earth, for I am the Lord who brings you up of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy, says the Lord. This is the law of the animals and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. So that's the whole chapter of Leviticus 11. Now, the title of my sermon for today is The Reasons Behind the Unclean Foods. Now, let us go deeper. What lies the reason why these so-called unclean foods are forbidden not to be eaten for human consumption? When we eat any of the species of animals where the Bible says unclean, they are usually unfit for human consumption. Now, technically speaking, we are poisoning our human bodies, which automatically have an adverse effects in our total health. So, kanina sinabi ko, for those unclean food, it may bring to sickness, healthcare investment, and of course, death. Now, in totality, the animals serve their purposes. Why these are created by God? Now, maybe their role as garbage removalists, water filters, and living sewerage processors in the Creator's master plan, of course, of maintaining the balance of the ecosystem of the earth. In short, they were not intended for human consumption. Now let us go much deeper about the so-called famous animals. Now we will discuss about their characteristics and their body anatomy, which are classified to be unclean, but they are consumed tremendously in the society as part of the recipe for human consumption. So the first one, we talk about the pig or the pork as the meat. Now the pig can carry approximately up to 200 types of different diseases and 18 different worms and other known parasites. Now the pig usually eats enormous amount of food, and since they have this type of characteristic, now the enormous food that they intake dilutes the hydrochloric acid in the pig's stomach. So alam naman natin na yung ating tiyan ay it is composed actually of acid that disintegrates yung any amount na pumapasok sa tiyan. Now, since itong pig ay kumakain ng marami, so it diluted the acid inside their stomach. If that happens, the acidity level of the stomach becomes low. Therefore, it allows since na-diluted siya, hindi siya acidic, it allows the toxins, viruses, parasites, and other form of bacteria to be absorbed into the pig's animal flesh or the pork itself. Now, to name a few of the parasites the pig has are the following, namely the trichinella, the tapeworm, and the toxoplasmosis. Now, some studies also show that the pork meat is one of the causes of hepatitis E, which is a rare form of hepatitis. Now, the pig normally fed all the refuse from the restaurants, chicken hatcheries, and slaughterhouses. So, yung refuse na tinatawag dito, ito yung mga dumi. If they are or the pig are raised with other of the animals, isinama siya, there is a tendency na they will eat the refuse of those animals, as this is part of their normal diet and the purpose for which pigs were created as the nature's garbage collector and waste removalist. Now, a person may be committing a slow suicide when they eat bacon, ham, sausage, or pork chops. Even the hog farmers, they're saying that sabi nila safe daw, and they feed the pig with corn, but still there is no guarantee that their indoor hogs hindi pwede siyang kumain ng sabi natin patay na daga or any fecal waste present in their surrounding. Now, pork meat should be considered homotoxin or a human poison and the probable cause of any common diseases and degenerative diseases. So that's pork or pig or pork as its meat. Now the second one is the wild and domestic animals. Now we can name a few of these animals such as bears, lions, camels, horses, kangaroos, the dogs, the cats, mice, rabbits, and others. Now, these mentioned animals are usually flesh-eating types, and these are considered carnivores, and their body anatomy shows a simple yet round sac-like stomach that secretes 10 times more hydrochloric acid as compared to an ordinary herbivore or plant-eating animals that is considered excellent for human consumption. Now, the intestine of these carnivores are only 3 times the length of its trunk for quick expulsion of its food, which likely to be rotten. Now, they also have large livers and kidneys to handle excessive amount of the uric acid as produced by their diet. Now, of course, our human body is designed differently, that eating their flesh becomes toxic in our body system. Now, study shows, or doctors have discovered that eating this type of carnivore animals has a very bad effect in our heart, liver, and other vital organs of our body. So that's wild and domestic animals. Now we talk about the fowls of the earth. This is how we can differentiate the clean and the unclean fowl, or normally termed as the bird. Now the clean species of the bird have a crop that prepares the grain and the food before entering its stomach, in a gizzard with a double lining which can be separated. So they bring their foods to the ground and divide it with their bills. Now we can look into, for example, a chicken. Normally, chicken eats corn, grains, vegetable, and of course some insects. Now on the other hand, the unclean birds in their captured prey, since most of it are considered carnivore. So pag sinabi natin carnivore, these are flesh-eating species. Now, carnivore or the unclean birds usually devour their food in the air or press it down with their feet and tear it apart with their bills. as they have a different type of digestive system. So nakikita natin to in particular when we see an eagle, kung paano niya talaga, paano siya kumakain, di ba? Talagang ginugutay-gutay niya muna yung prey niya bago niya kainin. Now, the enzymes in these birds are used to deal with the food chain upon which they depend, and these enzymes make their flesh more incompatible to the human digestive system. Now, there is also some studies about the possible transmission of viral diseases from the unclean birds once eaten. I think very familiar dito yung sabi nga nila, one of the causes of the spread of the COVID-19 is human eats bat, yung mga paniki. Now, the fourth one is creatures of the sea. Now, it was explicitly instructed that only those that live in the water that have fins and scales must be eaten. Now, the clean fish usually contain a balanced level of detoxification agents, such as the most important element, namely selenium and arsenic, in their bodies that give them more efficient system of eliminating toxins. Now, however, at two level of pollutants in the ocean, unlike the unclean varieties of sea creatures, it kills them. So, ibig sabihin, yung mga clean fish or hindi niya kaya yung high tons of pollution that is being spread in the ocean. Unlike yung mga unclean species, they have the capabilities to absorb these pollutants and live in the ocean. Now, an increased level of pollution will thereby limiting the clean sea production. Now, the flesh of the clean fish is made digestible for humans by the large quantity of selenium it contains. So, a particular example dito, di ba, yung salmon, na talagang a high source of selenium. Now, so that's the clean fish. Now we go to the unclean species. Now the unclean species as creatures of the sea includes the following: the shrimp, the prawns, lobsters, scallops, mussels, oysters, squid, octopus, crabs, which are known to be famous delicacies, and they are considered not clean. Now these water creatures are categorized or function as the waste collectors and the waste purifiers of the earth. So yan talaga yung kanyang purpose, tagalinis. But differently, ginagamit siya as part of their delicacies. Now we talk about pollution, water pollution. So of course we have to know exactly what are the type of water pollutions being dumped or thrown out and found in the ocean and any form of the bodies of water. So these water pollutants come in different forms. Number one, we have what we call the industrial waste. Now, a few years ago, approximately around 17 million tons was legally dumped into the ocean, and it consists of these dangerous components such as acids, alkalines, scrap metals, fish processing waste, sludge, and coal ash. Of course, we are referring here, please take note, legally dumped, or they are allowed to be dumped into the ocean. So hindi pa natin na isasama dito those illegally dumped into the ocean. Which I guess, alam naman natin na mas marami yun kesa sa legal na pinahintulot na itapon sa dagat. Now, so that's number one, industrial waste. Second, sewerage sludge. Now, if the sludge from a particular waste treatment plant facility of sewerage is not contaminated by oils, organic chemicals, and metals, it can be recycled as fertilizer for crops and probably used for other good purposes. However, since doing this process, it brings a lot of cost. So definitely, this waste treatment plant facility will look into a much cheaper of how they will dump ito mga sewerage sludge materials. So definitely, they will, instead of processing it, they will throw it into the ocean. Okay, so that's the second type of waste, sewerage. Now the third type of waste as part of the water pollution is what we call the radioactive waste. Radioactive waste is also dumped in the oceans and usually comes from the nuclear power processing plants. Now, power plants, also medical use of radioisotopes, and research use of it and other industrial waste. So that's the radioactive waste. Then the last one is what we call the accidental waste. Now, of course, this may quite be familiar to us, and these are waste incurred during transit or ships into the ocean. Now, accidental waste actually involves spills in any of its kind. If accidents or catastrophic event happen, the vessel or the ship owners would perceive less cost to do the cleanup of the ocean floor. Kumbaga, instead na ang allowed is for them to clean up the mess or the spill, kumbaga inahayaan na lang nila yung spill na kumalat kasi mas magastos. Now, this is a classic example of an illustration how the in this case ito yung mga oysters. Kumbaga they place kumbaga yung nasa right side, ito yung sabihin natin na yung contaminate, sabihin natin water with water pollutants. Ngayon, ang ginawang experiment dito, they put some oysters doon sa tank at dito natin makikita how the oysters clean or filters the water with pollutants. So, lumalabas na dapat nalinis niya. So, ang tanong, nasaan yung dumi? So, of course, ito yung sinipsip ng mga oysters. Now, the sea creatures exposed to any of these waterways, which I mentioned 4 types of waste, are usually contaminated with parasites and resistant viruses that may not be even killed with high level of heat. They are considered scavenger animals and may contain high levels of mercury, diseases, cholesterol, worms, parasites, and sometimes pesticides and other forms of residue from any of the man-made form of pollutants, which they absorb from the water wherein they dwell. So ito yung kaninang previous example, how this animal absorb the polluted water. Now, eating of the foods containing these animals will give a quadruple dose of toxins, trans fat, acrylamide, mercury, and possible parasites or viruses that every bite of its flesh and meat. Actually, kaninang umaga, I looked into a reel sa Facebook na I don't know if it is true na in the US they are informing the Americans not to eat the shrimp because they found out that it has a radioactive waste material, waste component. Kaya sabi nila, abstain muna from eating the shrimp because it contains a radioactive component. Now, the next thing we talk about are the creeping things or the creeping animals. Of course, to name a few, this involves the caterpillars, the snake, eels, worms, lizards, chameleon, and snails. Now we take a look For example, the snail, it has poison. So if it is not handled carefully, it could be fatal once eaten. I think I remembered before na the way the snails are cooked, kumbaga tawag nila, pinapadura muna ng asin para mailabas yung toxin. So, that's true. It's true now that yung mga snail has poison. Now, in closing, our God definitely and precisely have very good reasons for all the laws He has given to all mankind. We can take a look, James 1 verses 17, it says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning." Now we should therefore trust that our God the Father know exactly what will be good for all the living and non-living creatures He has created on the earth. What we need to do is to have it practiced, obeyed, and executed as He had commanded in our daily lives. In this case, again, for those foods mentions, those foods we need to eat, that is clean, and those foods we need not to eat and avoid not to eat, or the unclean. Definitely and absolutely, it will bring and help us to live a healthy, abundantly, and long life benefits. Yes, in this room, we are lucky and blessed, indeed, that we already know the food laws as instructed and commanded by our God. In this case, a blessed and holy Sabbath